should,
Actually, Robert's coming in
there's
right
Robert.
now.
Yay. Okay, good. There he is.
Good morning.
Hi, Robert.
Okay, roll call. Robert.
Yes.
Good. Lars.
Here.
Barbara.
Here.
Jeff.
Here.
Margie. Here. Approval of minutes. None. Do we not have minutes? Oh, what's the
We
carry?
do not have minutes from last round,
Okay.
from last meeting, the last
One of the
meeting.
things I noted for today is that we do need to set someone to take minutes. Can we do that now? Who has
Have
not
we
gone?
all taken a turn?
Who has not taken a turn
I
yet?
have not.
Okay. Would you like to do it for today, Barbara?
I will.
Thank you.
I'm not good at it, but I will do it.
Little
Like
little
to is
does
an
she know
overstatement.
that, little do you know, Barbara, is that you actually get off a little bit easy in that all the site evaluation we're gonna do will be recorded.
Oh,
In the Excel file that Jeff shared, that Jeff made.
great.
so.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Oh, and I have to read. Sorry, I have to read the statement. This meeting is being conducted utilizing teleconferencing and electronic means consistent with the state of California executive orders regarding the COVID-19 pandemic. Zoom and YouTube are being utilized for this meeting. In case of technical issues, meetings will be uploaded to the city website as soon as possible after this meeting. We will be conducting today's meeting in a virtual setting using Zoom. Public Art Committee members and staff are participating from remote locations, practicing appropriate social distancing. Members of the public may view and listen to the meeting by use of Zoom, as noted on the city's website and noted on the agenda. Members of the public wishing to speak to the PAC may do so during public comment or may comment on agenda items during the discussion of each item and must be logged into Zoom. YouTube is a viewing only format. Anyone using abusive, vulgar, offensive, threatening, or harassing language, personal attacks of any kind, or offensive terms that target specific individuals or groups will be muted and removed from the meeting. Please do not abuse this new way to provide public comment. Thank you. Okay. Comments from the public regarding items not on the agenda.
We have not received any, although I think actually we had one comment regarding the item from your last agenda on the high school Ives Park display, but that will, I believe, is being agendized for the next meeting. So.
Thank you. Statements of conflict of interest. None. Regular agenda. Number A, update on security at Ives Park Community Sculpture Garden. Robert, is that you?
Well, that would be me.
me,
Of course,
excuse
I've
me
been
just a
gone.
moment. Can I have a question about the agenda before we get underway? I noticed that C is the same as the first bullet on 6.
Gee. Oh,
Mhm.
oh, thank you.
Let's see, ABC discussion. Oh, yes, it is.
So just an FYI for us.
Okay,
Okay.
so we can remove it from the number 6 then, since, or we may need it for number 6 anyway, if we're continuing. So let's find out when we get there. How's that, Jeff?
That's fine.
Thank you. Okay, Robert.
Well, I was gone for a month, and Uniglass has now left the employment of the art center without
Oh.
giving me an answer as to their vendor. But I did send you all a memo about it wherein I suggested that based on my conversations with Rincor, who install those kinds of systems, that putting cameras on the posts of the north patio at the art center is a pretty hopeless endeavor anyway, in that the distances from there to the sculptures is so far that while you would be able to see that somebody is defacing a piece of artwork, you could not possibly identify them with the resolution of cameras that are available. And frankly, their suggestion was put fake cameras up. It's as good as you can do.
Okay, thank you.
And it came to several, was it $6,000 in that memo?
Yeah,
Something like
it was-
that.
Huge. Mhm.
So I'd just like to say, in addition to the possibility then of discussing whether to put up fake cameras, I would like to include a suggestion of one sign that would say something like, please come and enjoy the sculpture garden, and please respect the work of these artists who have donated their work for all of our enjoyment, and please bring your friends and neighbors to visit. Couldn't hurt. So, discussion?
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I mean, that's user friendly and unintimidating, and sort of puts the responsibility upon the viewer and the visitor. They certainly couldn't do any harm.
Where would you put that sign, Margie? And thinking relative to the two signs that we currently have.
It's something we can select. Actually, when I think about it, and I don't know why, where I envision it is somewhere in the middle along the fence that goes near the creek. That's not necessarily the best place. That's just what comes to my mind.
That seems reasonable. On the other side of the path from the sculptures.
Yes.
Excuse
If we
me.
were to move to a sign like that, I have a general concern with signage anyway, in the world, but also in the city. We've discussed it a few times, but the more signs that are present, the more I feel like it takes away from the uniqueness of that space and what that space is all about. So the more we can combine signages together in one spot, I would encourage us to do that.
We could put a sign on the backside of the signposts that hold the sign at the west end of the sculpture garden.
That's the interior to the park sign. The
Thank
one
you.
that's in the park.
Thank you, Carrie.
You're welcome.
But the other sign on the east side has a back-to-back already,
It does, yes.
right? We moved the one, yeah.
We
okay.
switched them. Mhm.
Yeah, I think
Would
that makes sense. Just do it on the one side on the,
it actually be seen? I can't, it's like if you just think about walking into the park from the west side, you wouldn't see it. And as you're coming from the east side, you wouldn't see it till you got all the way out, if you even looked at it.
Well, if you even looked at it, applies to any sign, certainly one on the other side of the pathway. I mean, there's a reasonable argument to suggest that sign isn't going to do any good anyway.
Well, where might it be located then, where it had the greatest opportunity of being seen by anyone who might be looking at the sculptures and thinking about?
Well, I think if there's going to be a sign, I think your suggestion is good. On a fence post on the other side of the walkway in the middle.
Yeah,
And then when you're looking at the sculptures, you don't see that sign. Because you're looking south instead of north.
Mhm.
but if you're coming in, you will see it.
You
approach.
might, depends on which direction you're looking.
Okay,
Can
Any
it be
other
just
comment?
below, can it be below our current sign that faces east or faces west?
I'm sorry, something about the current sign, allow,
Can it be
could.
below?
below.
So it's
It could.
just, it's like it's not as tall, linear sign, post to post, just below the bigger sign we've put up for about the whole
Well,
thing.
particularly at the east end, because that sign is fairly high, because that's what was established by the previous sign that we turned around.
Mhm.
Hmm.
So yes, if you're thinking of people entering the sculpture garden from the east end, then a sign below the existing one would be very feasible.
That would be my preference, to attach it to one of the existing signposts. Again, trying to keep things, as efficient as possible and, together where people might be reading the signs anyway.
Hmm.
Okay, good. Any other comments?
Excuse me, just one moment. Carrie, would the city be able to do this for us and without any?
So I think it, I don't know whether it would need to come out of the public art budget, just like the other signage. Either way, I don't think it's a hugely expensive sign. I would ask that someone from this group design it. And presumably it's not on the, on metal, the nice shiny metal, it's maybe a white background or something. So that it's not quite, it's more visible in that way and not the elegant sign. But yeah, I would ask that someone else design it. I don't have time in my workload to be a sign designer.
I think to that comment, I think in some way it should be less visible than the other sign.
But I
Right, we want
Well,
to
that's
call
that's a
attention
good
to the
point. Yeah,
sculpture
yeah.
garden. To me, this is just sort of a disclaimer sign to, discourage people, but not like scream out to them.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
It
but,
also,
it should look different. It should not be the same.
this also could set a precedent if we ever need to do this again. That sign would have a consistent look to it.
Have to say, when I walk through the sculpture garden, which I often do since we live nearby, the signs that we have are a little hard to see, especially when there's light on them, because they don't have a white background. And I'm not sure what that means in terms of this sign, but I do think this sign should look different. It should not be the same look as the others. And in terms of design,
could we ask Jen Mertz to do it?
yeah, I can work, or someone else with me or whatever can work on the text. And in terms of font and layout, that would
Yeah,
be,
like Jen
perhaps
could
Jen.
she
Yeah.
could do that in 10 minutes or something, probably.
yeah.
And she has said she would be willing to help us with stuff.
Okay.
And Mark, I'm happy if you want to share a draft of the language with me. I'll work on that with you. I do
Okay.
think it should be. I know you were just kind of throwing out the language originally at the beginning of this discussion, but I do think less is more. The simpler the statement, the better. In other words, in terms of, inviting other people to come and see it, maybe that's a little bit too much for the one sign, but we can discuss that.
Okay. And then this is good. And in terms of size, say, maybe similar width, but less height.
Yes, it
think
would
that
need to
makes
be that.
sense.
It would have to be 36 inches wide to fit the posts.
Okay,
We
thank you.
went to 42 with the sign that we put up because we were allowed to go 3 inches past if the corners were radiused. But I think that the new sign should stay within the posts.
Yeah, that's what makes it smaller visually.
Okay. And it kind of depends on the text too and the font size, but in general, kind of like
Well,
that.
it depends on how far away you want people to be able to read it.
Well, how, they can't, I mean, the text that's on the sign that's there, that's a certain size.
But you're right up close
Similar
then.
size, yeah.
So if you want people to see it from a distance to kind of prepare themselves not to deface it.
I think it's definitely worth a visit to the sculpture garden to actually scope that out. I think it's something that can be a little challenging to discuss without actually being there. So you can actually look at the font on the existing signs, and maybe make a more accurate decision on that.
Okay, so how about this? I will work on the text and send a copy to Jeff, and we'll work on that and talk to Jen. And next meeting, we can discuss font size and width size and possibly color.
Or perhaps Jen will even have a draft of the sign by then.
Okay, sure.
So for clarity, Margie, you're going to be talking with Jen?
Yes,
Okay,
and I will send that through you. I need to, right?
to whom? Oh, to
Through
me?
Jen, through
Oh.
Carrie.
Oh,
right?
Karen.
No, you can coordinate directly with
Oh.
Jen if you have emails. If you could
Yes, I
CC me
see.
on those, that's great. But otherwise, just absolutely go ahead and communicate.
Great, thank you
directly
for
with her.
clarifying. All right, that's excellent. Thank you, everybody. So we'll put it on the agenda for next week. Okay, next. Page,
May see me.
huh?
I'm just talking to myself, I'm sorry.
Oh, okay, here it is. Okay. Security, Future Art Commission, site selection, and we discussed the available funds, but we can go over that again. So, site selection. Comments?
All right, hold on a second and I will I'm just making sure I capture the Ives Park structure sign update on our next agenda.
So
So I don't
last
forget
week,
it.
we had kind of slightly narrowed down some locations that we were seriously considering. And as I recall, that's how far we got.
Yeah, and Jeff put together a sort of, these are the 4 sites, the North City limits, so that would be near the county trail, whether it's on county land or that weird other piece of land that's privately owned. The trail, West County / Joe Rodota, I'm not sure where it changes, specifically right across from the Hot Monk and the city parking lot.
Was that the one near the bench?
Yes, yeah, and I can bring these up on Google Earth if we need, but I think we mostly know where they are. Spooner Park down across from the Art and Soul building, and the Covert Highway 116 kind of area. And sorry, go ahead.
Will you be sending this out to us?
I can. I thought we would actually go through as an activity
Yeah,
today.
I just mean to have.
Yeah.
It's a valuable checklist.
Yes,
Yeah,
and once it's filled out,
Okay.
today, that's actually where I was saying you'll have most of your minutes done, Barbara, because I'll send this to you.
Oh, thank you.
But you can also do a screenshot and just print that for yourself immediately or today.
So I just wanted to comment briefly. So the site criteria on the left-hand side of the matrix, I came up with that. I shared it with Lars, and he approved that. He was good with that. The only other thing I added, if we can scroll down, carry to the bottom of that first column, is electric access. Thinking that, you know, potentially in some sites, you might want to be able to light sculptures at night. So this is another possibility So,
Oh,
and these criteria in no way are necessarily in a priority order, although I try to put them in, in terms of our thinking and past discussions.
I'd like to say that I'd like one other category which goes beyond numbers, and I just would like us to personally not just consider things in terms of numbers and data, but also in terms of how that relates to approaching the city as a gate to the city, and how our individual senses of the population relationships to those spots are. Do you know what I mean? Beyond
Would
the,
that be captured by the city location? I mean, the sort of the.
all right, thank you.
I think.
Thank you.
Mhm.
I thought that was just, yeah, okay, great.
And I did, just so you know, Joe, I changed the order of a couple of these just because I thought they might be a little bit, we can change them back, but like the
Mhm.
space for it and the scale of the site kind of to me were probably going to go together as we go through the discussion.
Yeah. Yeah,
So I just put those two together and
Sure.
whatnot, and
Sure.
I'm actually going to change
yeah,
and
that's
put that up
appreciated.
there.
well, thank you for doing this, because I think, again, as a precedent, this is a really valuable document. It condenses the considerations, excuse me, and makes it easy to manage. So I think we can continue using it.
Could I ask a question? These 4 locations precede my presence on the committee, but I was wondering about the Miller site, or across the street from that, the corner of the landscaping at Wright being downtown locations, and Miller Oil only doing vehicle smog inspections, doesn't really use the Highway 116 end of their property. Were either of those sites considered, or anybody asked about that possibility?
So there's a couple of issues with that, Robert, that I can address. One is that it is not a public site, and so we would have to go through sort of updating our ordinance and it would require some sort of agreement with them to use city funds or install something on a private site. I do also know that back when Dave Gordon was on this committee, he had actually, I think he or someone had designed a mural for the building, the Basso building, adjacent to the Miller Oil. It was actually a really cool concept. However, the Miller Oil owners did not want it. They felt it would preclude future development. I'm not sure if that means they would be open to a sculpture or some other art. I mean, like you could have that as a mural, but they have already had a mural designed and denied allowing an encroachment permit even for the building next door because of that. So I suspect they're probably not I'm terribly amenable to it, but our code also specifies public property at this point.
Can you quickly show on the map where other than Spooner Park, I'm not clear where there's public property at the locations that we're talking about on the
Sure.
spreadsheet?
Sure, yeah, so obviously just to review the sites, Spooner Park, which is all city owned.
Right.
The next one up, if I can get there, is
At the Rodota Trail.
here at the Rodota Trail, right by, here's the city parking lot and the postal annex. So
Right.
right there is a bunch of space. I have had conversations with regional parks, and it's not an issue for them to have public art on their property. What kind of
Okay.
agreement, licensing or otherwise it would be is TBD, depending on the art. And then the Covert 116 is, I'm guessing somewhere in here off
One of those
the,
islands, yeah,
off of the Caltrans right of way.
Mhm.
okay.
Okay, so that is on the, as you're coming into town in terms of a gateway, that's then on the right side of the street, correct?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yes, and
And
then
don't-
yeah, and then the last one would be, so up by the Riley Building, there's the West County Trail. Again,
Yeah.
that's county land. I think this is the part that is a little weird. It belongs to that property. And then this is the schools, although that is still, a potential there right at that crosswalk.
Okay, thank you.
So those are the sites.
We have two at north end and two at the south end.
Yeah.
Okay. So one way to do this is just to go through each of us speak about our first and second choices and why. How's that?
Well, I disagree, actually. I think we should look at one site,
At a
and go
time?
down the site criteria,
cool.
and input the information as briefly as possible. And one of those criteria can also already be filled in. I pulled up the vehicular count map. So if Carrie
great.
can go ahead and plug that in for the first one, it looks like 17,200, just to round off, which would be the same for the covert site, basically.
Okay,
And then
and those are daily
Just-
trips, I believe.
Just, can you? put
Yeah,
the
these are
form on the
daily
screen or
trips.
Fill it out, please.
I'll get there in a second, Margie. Hold on.
Thank you so much.
Trying to pull up the map too.
Yeah,
Sorry.
24-hour counts. And then it shows Spooner, it shows 22,008, or yeah, approximately 22.9 rounded up. And then about the same for the county trailhead at Petaluma Avenue.
Okay.
Although it does show another number northbound only at the intersection of Petaluma and Abbott.
Which would be the location generally of, that's Petaluma and Abbott is one parcel north of the trail that we're talking about. So what is that number? That's probably more appropriate.
That one's 11,100. That's about half. That's a little peculiar to me,
That doesn't make sense.
how it goes down by half. So
Uh-huh.
at that point,
Where
but
would all those cars have gone?
Southbound on the other side is what it is. It's southbound on Main Street.
Oh, because
and-
Spooner measures
That makes
north
sense.
and south.
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
Okay.
So you're only catching half the traffic.
Yeah, that makes more sense, right? Okay.
And is the north and south traffic as well?
The north end is not a divided one-way thing.
Right.
Right,
So it's both directions.
okay.
So whether or not it's visible coming from both directions is part of the visibility criteria below, but the actual traffic count is passing by the site.
Okay,
And then Carrie, do you have those pedestrian numbers at hand, or?
Let me see. I don't have specific numbers. Let's see, but our transportation, that would have been an actually entirely different study. But I do have information from our traffic consultant. Hold on. So. I do have from him what would be the highest, which would be the Petaluma and Joe Rodota Trail. So put that as a 3+. And then the other trail, because it's a trail and has a lot of folks up there, is the north city limits. And then the other two are, let me just do that. Less pedestrians.
Oh, good.
So there we go. We'll do that. That's
Mhm.
Okay, so as far as
That
city
helps.
location goes, is that already descriptive in the names of these sites, or does anyone have any input on another way to express that?
You mean for the city location?
Yes.
How about we just, whether say whether it's a north or south gate?
Like
Yeah.
that? Yeah.
Yeah.
Or gateway. Yeah, there you go.
Okay.
And the Petaluma.
That's south, yeah.
Sort of.
Good.
Okay.
So perhaps now, since we did those things, we could just focus on one side at a time and just go down.
Yes. All right. And so this is where I was trying to get Google Earth. So let me get the first one. There we go. Okay. So just an overview. This is basically the city limits on the west side. That's the entry to the charter school and O'Reilly's.
Oh,
We aren't quite within the city limits
Oh, I
here, but I think this is, essentially where Sebastopol starts in most people's minds. And so this is the Mill Station Road intersection. And so what we have is the
Can you show us from coming into town? From that direction, please?
hold on, let me just try to get it on this. I'm trying to get this all on the same screen so it's quick for you guys, but let me.
It's impressive you can do this.
Yeah, I'm trying not to have to flip back and forth too much though, so. All right, so. All right, can you see? So this is the owned by Sonoma County, the West County Trail as it comes up, which is a little bit north of that intersection where it comes out.
Okay. When you're driving into town, you're on the other side of the road, correct?
You're coming
Yes.
from
Correct.
Forestville. You're suggesting coming from Forestville.
Yeah, because those, we're
Yeah.
talking about entrances, not exits to town.
Mhm.
Yes, and so if you do this, you can actually just go that way. All right, so this is far enough back where you can see this is coming into town.
Mhm.
Look at my screen. I gotta move this to a different screen. Can you still see it?
Mhm.
Okay.
So coming into town is
So
on.
here's the
left side.
trail coming out on this side. And then. Oops, sorry.
Are we thinking that to use that site, we would have to remove a tree? That one on the left
So
by the
there's
light pole?
there's a few options. One is to have it on, if it's on the West County Trail, it'd be kind of right up where that sign is.
Okay,
If you worked, I mean, with the charter center school, which we haven't, I don't know if we've discussed that in particular. This is the charter school's property. And if you worked with O'Reilly, which is private land. But I do know the folks there and they would probably be amenable to it than somewhere where these signs are. That's probably more difficult, I will say, because that's a bioswale in there, so it is a particular
Mhm.
drainage. So it's not like you could build a big platform of it or something. So it really
So,
probably limit the
none of these-
sculpture.
None of these are entrances. They're all exit sides.
no, you're coming in now. The trail's on your left as you're coming into town from Forestville.
It's
See,
on your left, so the
Yeah.
traffic is going by you on your left and you're going in, so there's nothing, we're not talking about something on the right,
no.
which is the
No,
entrance
it's on the
direction.
right when you leave.
Yeah,
but
but that's an exit.
Well, you
not
can't
an
help
entrance.
that, though.
Well, it doesn't matter.
Well, that's what I'm talking about, that in relationship to the site, it's an exit side, not an entrance side.
Right, but you
Okay.
still see it. You're looking, when you're driving, you're looking both ways. But my question is, are those two different sites on one's on one side of the charter school driveway and one's on the other? Is that correct, Carrie? Are we
So
looking?
I think the main one, so this is the West County Trail. Again, I've
Yep.
talked with regional parks and they are okay with art as part of, working with them in terms of having on their land. So this is the main area where there is, I mean, that's the county land.
Right, and then the other site you mentioned was the O'Reilly property, which is further down, right?
Yeah, I probably wouldn't recommend trying to, again, that gets into the
Okay.
private property issue that we talked about with the Miller Oil site, where we'd have to change our code or figure out what kind of agreement they would need to have. It's also a bioswale in there, so it's
Right.
not, it's more difficult to build on.
So
I
is
think the
there,
other reasonable option would be the charter school land,
Right.
since it's school. And yeah, that does get into, would they be really willing to remove a tree or not, or have it kind of in this area?
Mhm.
And
But
are there
that's-
visibility issues given the trees surrounding it?
But does that mean that that's also private property because it's the charter school?
I have to look into it. Schools are generally publicly owned. I don't know
Oh,
how that
that's
applies to charter schools, but school,
I
like
thought-
Annalee High School, you wouldn't have a problem with that. It's a public school.
Yeah, but the charter school owns that site.
Yes,
Yeah, I remember
yes.
them raising money and buying it and then selling the building downtown.
Yeah, but they're
Correct.
still, Carrie's right, they're still receiving public money, even though they're a charter school. They're a
They're
public
chartered.
school.
But
They're
they
chartered
own
in the
that,
Sebastopol Union School District.
Yeah, but they're also
yeah, there
started
you
by
go.
the State Board of Education and the county too. I think they have to adhere to those. I don't think they literally own the land. I think that probably the school district owns the land. I don't know, but I don't
I
think.
don't know.
No,
They
no.
they own the land,
I
but they
believe they
do,
own the
but you're
land,
right,
yeah.
they do get money from the state. They are connected to the jurisdictions, but they do own the property,
Wow.
just like they own the downtown property.
yep.
Huh.
Can I ask that the next one, can we just look at both north ones at the same time?
Well, why can't we
Yeah.
all comment on this one like Jeff?
Yeah, but I mean, next,
Let's see.
when we finished.
All right, so those are the main assessment of the scale, visibility.
But this site is not a given. It's still contingent upon getting access from a private entity or something, right?
Well, that's where the West County at the trailhead
Mhm.
is not an issue. I
Right.
mean, I would say that that should not be a barrier. It's not Caltrans Regional Park. I
Oh,
have a good
okay.
working relationship with. Like for instance, they have a trail that goes, there's a trail on the Riley site that goes to that. They just did that through a licensing agreement and kept it simple.
Okay,
So my guess is similar to the sculpture garden where we're technically on county property. It's through a licensing agreement. It was super
Oh.
simple. My hope is that we could probably do the same, a similar
Okay.
thing with this.
Good.
So
How
Carrie,
wide is Caltrans right away?
see, I believe it's to the back of curb.
Mm,
Okay.
So once
So,
you
I
get
mean, we don't want to
off
fight with
of,
them again.
so there, yeah, so no, exactly that, and that's the, absolutely, I agree with you, Robert. So here's you know, the county owns basically up to the roadway.
Okay. I mean, this would be a lovely site for something large scale like what Ned Kahn had proposed in the first place by the bridge on the east side.
oh, yeah. It'd have to be pretty big. Because you are driving on the other side of the street.
Yeah, I think that this wants a large scale piece.
Mhm.
That's
And
another,
they- and-
at the site also that, of course, as you mentioned, Robert, would probably require some tree removal to expand the visibility of whatever piece would be put there.
Yeah, although Carrie, just to the right of the plus sign, that's your cursor.
Oh,
That's
I'm
a-
sorry, I thought okay, hold on.
That's a kind of scrub oak thing that I don't think anybody's going to be terribly attached to.
I wonder if there's ever any discussion about the traffic lights being visible enough. I know we're not going to be putting anything in front of it, but if people are focusing their attention upon a sculpture and not paying attention to the traffic light.
Hmm.
You know, that's a red herring, if I may. And Ned has deep experience with that, and it's always the stuff that's brought up and is never proven to be so in practice.
Well, I'm just asking the question, because that, you know, that would, all of these could be possible impediments.
I will
Well,
say,
there's
so.
there's no location where you can't make that argument.
I
but
think
it just has
there.
never proven to be a problem.
Yeah, I think I will say, I think there are some that are sort of identified as traffic kind of safety potential issues. And I'll bring those up as we go through. I don't think this is one of them. The sidewalk and the trail are very separated from the traffic. I actually go up to Grayton a lot to go walking on the trails up there. And coming back into town, it's not really I mean, it's pretty laid back. It's not like it's you know, people know people who are using this road are generally, they know what's going on. People are sort of slowing down at this location because they know there's the light there. You can see the light. It's pretty well visible in
Okay.
that regard. There are some locations where I don't feel that way, so, but this is not one of them. Okay, so I was in the midst of trying to help fill this out. So anything that so I'm putting in would need something large scale. Do we need to have more notes on that because of the site or surrounding trees or anything like that? That's good enough. Any comments on the scale of the site?
I would say appropriate.
I would also say it's also relative to tree removal.
And people said they thought we need a big sculpture, especially big.
And that's above,
Got that right there.
So when you say
Oh.
it's appropriate, Robert, what do you mean by that?
I think this, the size of the available site, assuming that we make an agreement with the school, is appropriate to a large scale sculpture. It wouldn't feel crowded on the site like I think such a sculpture would be on one of the islands at Covert.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I'd like to just comment that we have 40 minutes
Mhm.
left. So if we're gonna, I don't know if we'll get through all four at this rate, just for people to consider that.
Probably not.
Well,
I had a comment on the visibility, though. I think it's important with visibility to mention that it's on one side of the street as opposed to centered or
Right.
And also that it's on the exit lane.
I mean, I think there's also perceptual sense, like, yeah, in some ways this is where this town starts, but to me it feels very rural still. And the difference of this versus like Covert, you're very much in town. So even I know we're talking about the idea of a gateway, but this feels like it's too far out of town.
Well, I understand what you're saying, but I disagree because there's really nowhere else to go but to continue going into town. You know what I mean? You're already on the literal path to get into town.
Well, I'm sorry, that depends on where you live. And I really think that, the perception of town is divided into north and south people. I'm a north person and other people are south people, and they sort of don't go past Highway 12, and neither do I going the other way for the most part. So, you want one at each end, but I come into town on Covert, and that'd be common for people living out west of town who come in Occidental Road.
Right, and that's kind of inherent in the numbers. Let me just go back to those traffic
Yeah.
numbers.
Mm-hmm.
These are the two, and actually I'm gonna put these in this order so that they're the two north gateways are next to each other, the two south, going from north to south. So they're basically the same. And this may actually not be the Covert lane traffic numbers, but it like if you're coming in from Covert lane, this is probably both the Covert and the north-south.
I mean, the advantage of Covert is it's right by a shopping center that is used heavily, in that the hardware store is there. And even if you're a south of town person, if you want to go to the hardware store, that's where you go.
Right. All right, I will jump back and I will just kind of note, just so you all know, just the discussion of the in-town versus out of town. And I will admit I'm a North Sider as well. I live north of Healdsburg. These two sites here are about to be, we're about to get an application for about 80 units of housing. So I think that will kind of change the feeling. I mean, still will feel that kind of ruralness on the north side of town, but that's, this is the site we're talking about right here.
Right.
And these two are about to have, or in the next few years, will have a lot more residents, most likely.
Wow.
And would they use the O'Reilly parking exit road, or would they go to Hurlbut?
They would be coming out on Highway 116. There would be no access on Hurlbut. That's a county road. And in fact, there's a deed restriction on this property that it can't take access via Hurlbut.
Okay.
So it'll all be coming out onto 116.
well, that'll increase the traffic count.
Boy, no kidding.
And slow it down.
Well, not that much. It's 80 units and, a couple trips per day per unit. It doesn't change it by 1,000.
Right. So anyway, that's just as a background. Okay, so other obstructions. I don't see any other obstructions for this particular site other than the vegetation. It's not, is that okay for
I think we could move on to the covert.
All right, I just want to make sure we capture anything, even if these are none, just so we.
Mhm.
Hmm. I think that's very minimal cost considerations. Is that gonna be any? There's no purchase of or anything going on.
Oh,
I would say electrical access is probably difficult with this site just because it's not a city-owned site. That's.
Well, there is that
but-
traffic signal box there, and so it certainly has power to it.
Yeah, that's Caltrans. I don't want to go there.
Oh, yeah.
But so is that for, I guess, for lighting is what that's related to? And what are utilities besides
Right,
electric?
Right. And I am signed in, so I may be able to get, I'm gonna be able to get water and sewer. I'm not gonna be able to get electrical lines.
And then part of that utilities thought is that if there's underground stuff and there's a piece that needs to have foundational work or something,
Hmm.
well, we don't want all of a sudden be surprised by, oops, now it's got to move 10 feet.
yeah. Mhm.
So are you referencing like a flood zone?
No, like a water line or a sewer line or something like that.
Mhm.
I do. There probably isn't up there actually, because it's not within the city limits, so the water infrastructure and the sewer infrastructure won't go that far.
Mm.
So that is actually,
You know,
so like this is basically the end of the city's
Right.
infrastructure is right here for water and sewer, so there wouldn't be any for up there. So that may actually be a plus.
No septic field.
Correct, exactly. The trail isn't gonna have a septic issue or anything like that.
you know, though, adding a section for flood zone might be a good idea, because if we continue to use this form in the future, or even now,
Yeah,
we've certainly been challenged with that in the past.
Excellent, all right. But in the interest of time, I'll just put hazards.
Oh, that's good. I think that's probably enough. Yeah.
All right, there we go.
Good.
Okay, so then we're going to the covert. And this is one, sorry. Sign in. Where I do want to go down to the intersection, because I think it is important to know that a lot of the intersection is Caltrans.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you're talking about Covert Lane, so there's a couple of things for this. One is with the impending development on the north side of town and a couple other places, this is an intersection that's identified in our general plan as needing traffic improvements, either a roundabout or a signal.
So
And
that
so-
would be a bad idea.
Yeah,
Have a traffic light there? That'd be terrible.
sure would.
I think it's actually one where a traffic signal is much more, I mean, a traffic roundabout would make much
Roundabout.
more sense, given we
Yes.
actually do have the land. There's no sidewalk on this side here. However, we've had a meeting with these folks. They are interested in potentially redoing their property configuration, which would include the building curb gutter sidewalk for that. So in terms of pedestrian access to it, otherwise pedestrian access is going to be along the south side, south side of Covert and Hillsburg. And the nearest crosswalk is right back here by the Fandies.
Mhm.
So just in terms of pedestrian stuff, I believe the city owns these two islands. But again, if this is somehow reconfigured, that could potentially have an issue with, art placement. Personally, I think if it ends up being a roundabout, it'd be great to have something in the middle of the roundabout as part of that design. And so
Yeah, we
My-
could certainly envision something, placing something, and if and when a roundabout is built, move it to the center of it. Having just come home from Spain, I'm a big fan of roundabouts.
It's typically required to have something in the middle of the roundabout to block your view across the roundabout as a driver. If it's
Interesting.
not a piece of art, it's trees or a giant rock, bunch of rocks or something that's part of the design
Yeah,
of the
make sure
traffic.
people don't try to drive just right over it or through it and see
No,
that
or
there's
that
a
they're
around.
not distracted by
Yeah.
the people there because they're not important in how you drive. You just have to worry about going to the right.
Ah, I learned something. Thank
Yeah,
you.
me
That's-
too.
But I
Sounds
don't
like
think-
this location could be very significant in the future for an entrance.
Yeah, I think in the
but we
center of a
wouldn't know-
roundabout there, it couldn't get more ideal.
I beg your pardon, for the future, but we don't know for now in terms of
Right.
north entrance, so maybe we should focus on the south at this time. That's my thinking.
It seems like it is far in the future to imagine much improvement.
Well,
Yeah,
how-
what would the timeline be on that, Carrie?
Yeah,
It
Carrie?
could be years and years, right?
It is interesting. It would be certainly be if it's certainly beyond this current call, is what I would say. It's hard to tell with the City Ventures project on the north side of town. We will be doing traffic studies, which will include a signal warrant, a warrant of whether or not the added traffic triggers the need for that intersection to be improved, right? So if that is improved, then we would be starting to look at what that is, whether roundabout or signal, and go through that process, which would be with Caltrans. So yes, I absolutely anticipate that's a several year. And we've watched the Healdsburg was a very long process. They had an underground creek and a whole bunch of underground utilities there that the city here does not have. Napa, the city of Napa actually did one joint with Caltrans that I think it actually got done ahead of schedule and functions very well. But it is definitely a several year project. And so I would probably advise that this be slated for a future commission.
Well,
When
or
there's
to
a little bit more known
Robert's
about that.
Robert's point is we could install one and move it to the center of the roundabout.
Yeah,
we don't know what, I mean, what would fit in that new environment, what would look best. We wouldn't know now. And I deal with this intersection between Covert and 116 Healdsburg. And I have to say, it's a very difficult intersection. And my attention when I'm there is really on trying to safely merge.
That pedestrian, the crosswalk behind Fandy's is really dangerous. Anything that would help that. I've seen so many potential terrible accidents there with people trying to walk across that I'm sure that's going to be part of the improvement at some point. So anything we can do to enhance that, to help people slow down, I would certainly favor.
Well, a beautiful sculpture to look at would probably slow you
That's right.
down when you're driving.
Yeah,
There you go.
I agree. If you don't hit
I
it,
mean, I think to me, this is like this roundabout kind of concept. I think this is a very visible location and there's a lot of space around it.
Mhm.
I think you'd see it coming into town from the north. You'd see it from all three directions on this intersection
Mhm.
very clearly.
mhm.
And would that tree be removed then and
No,
replaced?
it's further down.
Oh.
It's the next
Oh, that's
island
right. Sorry.
closer to 116.
I get
Right, so this is right now where the pedestrian
Mhm.
crossing is on Covert. I would suspect, having not talked with specifically with our traffic engineer, that if you did a roundabout, there would be a potential for crossing up here too. At the edge of the roundabout, or I should say two instead of, it might move up there as part of those enhancements, but I think, yeah. Right now, what's probably available is that island right there,
Uh-huh.
or this island right here where there are trees already.
Oh,
Again, I don't know if those would need to be reviewed by Caltrans because of the adjacency to Caltrans. I suspect it would be on the city to, it's the city's property. We notify them, but they'd probably be fine with it. I don't know. I will say this is a little bit more of a traffic cluster in terms of, was it Margie or someone who talked about from a vehicle perspective, it's a much more difficult intersection to negotiate right now in terms of traffic safety.
The one on our right is
You mean then the mill
Problem.
station
going,
one?
going straight.
No, I'm talking, well,
Well, you
To
still have,
go-
when you're merging by going straight with traffic coming from your left. In other words.
Correct. So that's where these cars are,
Yeah.
right? The
So-
Volvo and the
Mhm.
SUV.
no, I'm talking about, see where the arrow is for turning? That,
This arrow.
yeah,
Oh, to get back onto Hillsburg Avenue?
yeah.
Yeah, so this is what you do if you're actually going left. Now,
Yeah.
I will admit I never actually have to do that because
Me neither.
where I live.
I
I
it.
do
Showing on
have
it.
to do this movement though, where I'm this car trying to
Mhm.
take a left to get onto Covert, and that's
Right.
kind of difficult.
It is.
It's
Yeah,
because
and if
you've got
you-
all this traffic coming in this way.
It's
If
still
you had
difficult.
if you had a sculpture over here on this, you're already past it when you're making that left.
Right.
And it's even difficult going straight, making that merge, because you have to look really hard to your left. So I think a sculpture there would be very helpful in just slowing things down and taking people's attention toward,
Where on the,
no, here. I'm sorry, I'm pointing.
sorry, go ahead.
The other, the one you just mentioned, Carrie, with that, that one.
That one.
I think that's really problematic, because if you're trying to merge and there's a sculpture there, so you can't see as well. And you're not paying, you don't want to pay attention to.
Well, I think,
Art,
but
you wanna-
wouldn't
you wanna
it
pay
be
attention
part
to
of
mo- to
our,
moving safely.
it would be part of what we put in the requirements for the piece. Like you have to, there's the site considerations. You have to make a piece that's appropriate for the site or you don't get selected. If it's a big wall that's blocking your view north, it probably wouldn't be the right piece to put there. Right?
No,
Well,
I'm
but
assuming.
I think that the northernmost, the more northern of those two islands is larger and a better spot than southern.
I agree with Robert on that the one where you're trying to merge to the south, I'll go back there in a second. I just want to make a note that I think this is probably one where if we want to move forward with this, I would want to make sure that those are that we talk about that with with our traffic engineer and make sure they don't see it as being a safety issue that could put the city at liability or have issues.
Well, the concept, it's interesting just to the concept of whether a sculpture makes people slow down or distracts them. Or whether they wouldn't look at it because they're focusing on something else. And
Or
it seems
neither.
to be that different people have different perspectives on that. But
Yes,
that it is a debatable, possibly problematic.
I think with this one here, because when you're sitting here, the Volvo SUV, you actually do need to look around back behind you. So it would probably limit, you can have a big blocky thing that limited site visibility. So it could potentially constrain on this median. You know, if you imagine if you had something big here and it was solid, you're gonna block the view in a way that isn't gonna be great for safety.
That's what I
And
was
so
gonna
it's,
say, yeah.
it's not, I agree, it's not impossible, because you can certainly say, well, you have to design it this way or that way, but you're limiting people from not having a big blocky, not having a big solid thing.
Well, maybe we can we can rely upon all the psychologists that Caltrans have on staff that
But one of the issues with Ned's that Caltrans was concerned about was distraction.
Mm,
Yeah,
That was a
Well, that-
big issue, and they really put that down, and they do have some experience with traffic.
Yeah, but
But
Ned
all-
has
all
experience
of
with
these
his sculptures.
sites- I mean,
Yeah.
all these
More than
sites are
others.
on the road, right? All
But
these
some more
sites are
than
on the
others.
road and
Yeah.
you're seeing them from
Yeah.
the car. So every one of these sites is going to have that issue.
This is a turning, an emerging area.
Yeah, three things are happening here, so it might be too busy to, at this point, to solve.
You know, another comment though is we've all been in towns and cities that have sculpture located in fairly urban situations, some of which are near traffic, some of which are near or along highways, and they've accomplished that. I bet a lot of those jurisdictions have also somehow persuaded Caltrans to be able to get things installed. So I wouldn't see that as a huge impediment. I think that's something that is, like you said, Margie, is debatable, but I wouldn't put it down because of those concerns.
I would say, just based on the experience of this committee and the prior planning director and myself with Caltrans for the NedCon, the preference is to keep it out of the Caltrans right away.
Yeah, understandable.
Otherwise, it's a full-time job to get it permitted.
So I'm thinking that maybe this priority is pretty low compared to the other sites, and that our focus might be on accomplishing something elsewhere, at least for now,
I
in
would
the next
agree
10
too.
years.
I don't know. I guess I disagree a little bit. I really love the visibility of this location, and I agree with some former members' comments about even if a roundabout is 10 years off, a sculpture or a piece of the right size and proportions and shape, I think would work and could be moved in the future.
I'm with you, Jeff.
As an artist, I would want to see the actual location it's going to be in, to design it to fit that location and not think, well, in 10 years, it'll be fine.
Okay, I'm with Jeff too, except that I don't want any of these things to get in the way of our moving towards something viable soon.
So Carrie, you're saying these islands are
So
city property, but
These
because they're,
medians, I don't know what the process would be with Caltrans. We won't need to go
Right.
through and get a permit or have their engineering or whatever look at them at
Right.
all, because
Mhm.
it's on city land. This is and you know that because this is city utilities here, where we have clearly we have probably a manhole cover there or some sort of maintenance there. But it's a little bit bigger in width and size, and probably a little bit more similar to what the center of a roundabout would be in scale, would be my guess. You know, this one's a little bit more linear and narrow.
And the one in the middle,
But it is,
that one, yeah.
well, that's just smaller. It's much more, I guess we haven't talked about that one. It does have the
you could-
tree in the back, so, where the covert lane label is, I don't think you'd see it terribly well. It also looks like there's overhead power lines there, so it would have to be up
Mhm,
here.
And that's potentially a vision problem for somebody making that left turn onto 116.
yeah. Unless it's thin enough, I mean,
Yeah.
skinny enough.
Well, can
And
we?
there's clearly some sort of water here too, because that's a standpipe cover.
Mm.
So, but you know, whether it's, you know, the feasibility of these two, I do think, yes, you could do it. You can certainly do a sculpture where you relocate it to the center of a median. Hopefully it's still sort of the same scale and whatnot. If it's a median in the future in the roundabout, it would likely be Caltrans property. So then you'd have to make sure that it's something that worked there, or just move it to a different location in town, which is of course always possible.
I'd like
Yes,
to say that we have 15 minutes and we do need to have time for Carrie to report, and including where we are with Ned Sculpture and about the multi-mural project that's coming to Sebastopol.
Okay, can we just, on this side for space and size, it feels like from our discussion that it's more, there's plenty of vertical space, not as much horizontal.
yeah,
As far as needing removal, seems like there were just some small shrubs that could potentially need to be moved.
yeah, the only, the only problem I can see with moving a sculpture or changing its location is the artist's original, I know we can make these all requirements, but just that we had full agreement that that there's a possibility that there will be the sculpture moved. The artist would have to agree to that, and also the shape and size and content would be mobile enough to be relocated. I think those would need to be very clear initially, especially in the, you know, the RFP or whatever, so the artists aren't designing things that are inappropriate to a site.
Mhm.
They have to be kind of multifaceted in a way.
Mhm.
So they
Right.
would fit elsewhere, possibly.
So Carrie, that could even be another criteria, other, just in general, if there are any.
Yeah, that's that's exactly true. Oops,
Yeah.
other.
And it's it's movability. It's relocation availability.
Ah.
Mhm.
Okay, there we go.
And then for other obstructions, wasn't there also overhead power line?
I think that's far enough away that it wouldn't really be an issue. Oh, I don't know what that thing is. I think they're mostly across behind, you know, on the west side of that.
Mhm.
Right, so they're there. Now I get into the NEDCON discussion with PG&E, which was it needed to be 20 feet away from a power line. I think it depends upon how big it is. NEDCON's, because it was 35 feet, needed to be a certain distance from the PG&E power lines. So that's a question, yeah. Right. Okay.
So then we could plan to address these other two sites at the next meeting.
That sounds good. Yeah.
Okay, so should we move on to Carrie's report? Just make sure we get that in.
Which are pretty easy. I have not heard from, so NEDCON project, we do have I think it already reported that the geotech report that we needed, because it's a different site than the Caltrans site, was completed. The city did that and coordinated that, or we didn't did it, but I coordinated that with the engineering firm. Ned has that. He's passed it on to his engineers. He is waiting for his engineers to get back to him. As you know, as I know Lars knows, engineers are pretty busy these days. So I'm sure they're getting it onto their schedule. But they weren't anticipating it at that time. So that is where it is.
I can read the email from him if you're interested.
Oh, sure. Go ahead. Yep.
Excuse me, is this from NEDCON?
Yes, I just
Yeah,
said.
yeah, we did hear
from
back
him
from
to
him.
me.
Yep.
Hi, Margie. The city required a soil engineer to do a study of the geology, which took a surprisingly long time. They just finished and sent the data to my engineers who are pondering if the design needs to be modified. When I hear back from them, I'll have a better sense of timing for fabricating and installing. Sorry, this is taking so long. Ned. There you have it.
Thank you. Perfect, Margie.
I had a question about that. Is there a possibility or potentiality for lighting for Ned's piece?
I think he did not want that.
And I think that would be that would also be problematic with the Laguna, where we're trying to keep it dark skies for habitat down there. It's a preserve area.
Light shed and, okay.
Yeah, and the reality is we don't necessarily want people walking on the trails in the dark and, you know, that kind of stuff. So in terms of lighting it, it's, you know, it's in a city park where our general park hours are supposed to be dusk to dawn, or dawn to dusk. Sorry, other way around.
Mhm.
Yeah. But I mean, the reality is it will be picking up the sunlight during the day, as I'm sure you've seen on some of his other sculptures. And then it could actually pick up moonlight at night and be very cool to see on those full moon nights when it's really bright in Sebastopol.
Okay, cool.
Is there a name to this site so I can include it in the minutes so people can know what where we're talking about?
Ned's site?
Mhm. Is there a
You
name
can-
to?
Ned's
You can
site.
call it the art is called Sebastopol Spire,
Okay,
SPIRE.
okay.
And then the mural project, multi-mural project, Carrie, with Art Start and Sebastopol relaunch.
Yes, so I have not been involved with this. The city manager's department is the overseer for the contract for relaunch. So I don't know a lot about this, and Margie, you may know more than me on this, but they are looking for potential opportunities for additional murals throughout town. Art Start, of course, did the worked with the Goodwill store to get the 4 murals, which are also on our city budget and a few other places now. They are mounted, I think we had talked about when we talked about the potential for a mural on Art and Soul, that they're actually mounted on pieces that can be removed that are then mounted on the building. Margie, did you have additional information on that?
Yeah, I spoke with Jennifer Tatum at the reception for that mural project, and she's with Art Start. And she said that Art Start, I think pretty much along with the relaunch Sebastopol, have a project already in the works. They already have settled on several different private locations, private property for murals in Sebastopol. And right now they are working on the details and agreements for those locations. And then they will start to work on the designs for those locations. So that's already in the works, and it is on private property. I mentioned that they might want to get some input from 2 previous PAC members who are experienced muralists, which is Jen and David Gordon. So she was quite interested in that. And I think through Carrie, I sent information, a note to those 2 people that she had, Jennifer said, here, have them get in touch with me if they'd like. And then there's something that Laura at Launch Sebastopol was very interested in getting communication about. I don't know if it was that or what it was, and she had a sense of urgency about discussing it because of the length of a grant that was going to be expiring. And I'm wondering, Carrie, do you have any further information on that?
I do not. She has not contacted me about that yet. I know that she did have some further discussions with city administration, so I'm not sure if that it was resolved at that level or not.
Okay.
I had a question about the viability of the the Art Start mural on private property, about inviting them to one of our meetings to give us more description on that. It just seems like appropriate that the PAC just be a little more informed about that, so we're just aware of it, so we can be,
Yeah,
speak
we're hoping to do
intelligently.
that.
I think that's a great idea, Jeff. I think it's great to, for Margie to have passed on Jen and Dave's contact, since they are definitely professional muralists and experienced in that. But yeah, for us to know about it as a public, or like I said, I haven't been contacted by them, but Margie talked with them at the opening. I think it'd be great. And Margie, do you mind extending an invite to them?
Oh, no, fine.
To Art Start to come
Yes.
and talk with us about what it is they're doing, what they're interested in doing, and see if there's any. Actually, I think we have that on the agenda for,
Yes.
we had that
Yes.
tentatively slated for December, so.
So that in addition, I'm just a little confused about the relaunch, because the woman who contacted me, Laura, was she did several times. She was very urgent about wanting to talk to me about a project. And then I got the information, because I hadn't talked to her. Carrie said, no, it has to go through the city.
Oh.
So I let the city handle it, but now
Mhm.
it seems like I don't know what the information is about what she wants to do. And maybe we can get some of that information before the next meeting, and she can come with Art Start, because it seems they are working together.
I will check in on that, Margie.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Maybe
yeah,
it's
as a city consultant, she needs to go through the department heads, not directly outreaching, since it's a city contract. So, and
What
she's
is,
been.
okay, what's the city contract, please?
So the city has contracted with Laura and her group to do the relaunch. That is a city project.
Uh-huh.
The relaunch is, work is being funded through the city council, contracted with her.
And they're contracted to, the relaunch is contracted to do, can you just say what very briefly?
It's a number of economic development and sort of coming out of COVID revitalization, community revitalization projects. And there's not a lot of, I mean, it was pretty open as to how they do that. And so there are some, there are ideas that they have come up with in terms of marketing the town and working on those types of things. Like one of the things they're working on is potential to have more programming in the plaza to enliven that and that type of thing.
Can I ask a question, please? When we are assuming that we want to have some kind of interaction with Art Start and relaunch and these murals, are we clear about what our role would be as the public art committee for the city? The reason I'm asking this question is that do we have any jurisdiction for anything that they do, or are we just an advisory committee? Because frankly, those murals all look alike. And the ones on the Goodwill, the one going into Forestville, it's the same. I believe it's the same person that's working with Art Start, who has a tremendous amount of influence on the way that design is created and executed. Now, I may be the only person that shares that opinion or notices that, but if that's the look that's going to be continually placed in public view, I have a problem with it being so.
Okay, so I can answer that question, Barbara. There's a few different ways. So a privately sponsored mural on private property,
I know that.
We do not regulate through our, the only regulation we have actually as a city is that it can't be commercial in nature, or it's considered in a way that it would be considered a sign, right? So like the Art Start at Goodwill, private organization, private property. I think in that case, having them come and present to you what they're doing is really just informational. So you guys know what's going on in town as a art organization.
Okay.
If it's a city sponsored or on public property, those go through the public art committee for recommendation to council. And then council is the body that actually approves it.
Right.
And there have been times in the past where the council has requested the Public Art Committee to work with someone to make something happen.
Okay, thank you. I
Also-
understand the dynamic. I just wanted to clarify it for myself, I think, but also just to put it out there that that's a concern I have.
Yeah.
So I was
Yeah,
gonna
and
say-
we do occasionally get or we may occasionally get, I know I've actually encouraged folks who are interested in murals to potentially apply through the city's facade improvement grant program, which is administered by the Design Review Board, so Lars is on that body. And I don't know if we've received any or approved any at this point, but they could be approved through that, but that would not be this body. It would be the Design Review Board represented this, and this group would be represented by Lars on that then.
I can add to that. So when speaking with Jennifer, she said they were going through that and getting some funding from that, from the facade improvement board. She said the murals, and I'm remembering, were an ongoing story. So there was a series of murals that would continue some story. And the part of the reason I put them in, hope to put them in touch with Jen and David is because they have additional styles input, as we have seen.
Yes, yeah.
We don't have, as Carrie is saying, we don't, I don't think, have much say in those murals, regardless of what we.
Yeah.
Yeah, but if it's not a city project, if Relaunch is sponsoring it, then there is a potential
Well, Lars,
city review process, and that's where I need to talk directly with Laura on that. To
They
see
are
how
working,
that's
I think they are working with Relaunch.
so Lars, have you seen anything come through the facade improvement program via the design review board from this group?
No, not that I can remember. No, the facade improvements have been more, architectural, so to speak, or, yeah, not that I can think of.
That's an interesting configuration going through that body. I mean, I think it's just interesting.
So we have, it's now noon.
I just want to say, Barbara, thank you for your comment and your concern about the quality of murals as part of our public artwork. Thank you for bringing that up.
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you.
I
agree.
think the quality is fine. It's the content that worries me.
Well, right. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's actually not a bad, if Art Start were to come and talk to you, we can have a conversation about
Right.
that. However you want
Exactly.
to.
Yeah.
I may not be the right person.
Okay, do we
Thank
have
you.
any other things we need to do before we adjourn?
Could I just say one little thing?
Robert, please.
I don't know if you guys saw the email, but Catherine DeVries is also leaving the Art Center at the end of the year for health
Oh.
reasons,
Oh,
What?
my.
Oh, no.
which makes me feel that the Art Center is beheaded and
Oh,
at risk.
I
Oh,
agree.
man.
Wow.
So,
Both Una, excuse me, Robert, both Una and Catherine then at the same time?
and the bookkeeper who's been working with Una.
Oh, brother.
And
So
three city
the
council.
board
members.
has their hands full and will
Mm.
certainly be doing a search for an ED who can get things under control, because financially it has not been over the last several years. So any thoughts that any of you have, they could use
still-
the help.
Are you still on the board, Robert?
Oh, no, we had one of those board explosions several years ago, and 5 of us had to resign at once.
Oh, brother.
I have not felt
Hmm.
welcome there in several years, much to my dismay, but nonetheless, I care about it, certainly. I built it. And so Sally Baker is the board president, and anybody who has any ideas might contact her.
Sure. Thank you for that information. It's
Yeah,
really disturbing.
I had a couple of I'll try to make this quick since we're afternoon, but I had a couple of things for potential discussion in a future meeting. One I brought up before, which is conducting a possible inventory of potential public art sites along the entry corridors, including any already existing art, whether it's on public or private property along those corridors. The other thing we've discussed a little bit too is the signage policy in the city, and just kind of curious where that stands, where that's going. And the third and last thing is with, as you said, Margaret, we got 3 new city council members are coming in. Would it be important and appropriate for one or more of us to show up at one of their early on meetings and kind of give a presentation about the PAC and where things stand? I'm not sure, Carrie, if there's any.
I think that's for that last one. So I've recorded the others on for agendas for future meeting topics. And doing an annual report or a report at a city council meeting about what's going on, the status and the projects we work. I think that's an excellent idea, actually.
You know,
And so
I
that
do too.
is, yeah.
I've asked each one of them to have what their stand is on public art as candidates, and fell flat. So
Oh, flat?
I haven't gotten a response from anybody as a citizen. As
Where
not
did you
the public.
ask that? At one of the forums?
I asked them each individually via email.
If you could send those emails perhaps out to us, I have another question for them
It's,
too.
it's too late now, really. It's
Well, there's
it's
still
next week, a week from.
Anyway, sorry to hit and run. I have to go to another
Thank you.
meeting. So,
I just all I
Okay,
did,
so
all I did, Margie, was just to ask, you know, can you convey your stand on public art? That's all.
Okay, thank you for doing that.
Mhm.
Okay, should we adjourn?
Before we adjourn,
Yes.
just to follow up, I'll put on the next, I can put on next agenda to think about a schedule for a presentation to city council. So we can pick a date and maybe it's February or something like that before we get into budget discussions. Or something like that, when you can do an informational presentation to council. Does that sound good?
Good, thank you.
Excellent. All right.
That's helpful.
Okay,
Right.
okay, this meeting